In our last video, we worked on putting together the border, inner border and outer border, which included a miter for our Merry Christmas bicycle quilt. This week we're going to go ahead and put our applique on it. So we're going to go ahead and slip that out of the way. When you open up your pattern, what you're going to find are 9 pages that have the completed pattern on it, and these pages are each numbered, and you're just going to go ahead and assemble these pages, and we're going to go ahead and move the camera, and that way you can see the ironing surface a little better, and we'll get to the next step. As you can see with the pattern pieces, you have each of the pages are numbered, and what you would do is just cut on the dotted line, and when you do that, what you'll get in the effect is this. Then you can just go ahead and match up the design, and you can either tape these or use glue stick. Sometimes I do one or the other, sometimes I even do both, just to make sure that the pattern's really stable. But you can see after you get sections together, this is what it looks like. And even this is just got tape and glue stick. Tape on the back and glue on the front. But you can see they're really sturdy, and you would just go ahead and assemble the sections together. And after you get all your sections together, you will have your completed pattern. And this is fairly easy to do. There's even a diagram up in the corner of the page number 1 that shows you how those segments go together. So I'm going to go ahead and set up my light box, and we're going to go ahead and lay out our pattern pieces, and we're going to go ahead and start doing our bicycle components and the lettering at the bottom. One quick thing I'd like to point out: because the pattern is bigger than my light box, I'm going to have to be shifting around my little quilt top. So one of the things I did was just put some tape on the paper and the back of the quilt, so that when I shift this quilt top, this little panel, that the paper and the fabric will move at the same time. That way I won't have the pattern getting distorted as it gets shifted along. I will remove that tape and paper before I iron anything, but it wouldn't be in the way anyway because it's out on the edges and I won't be ironing the edges. But I just wanted to point that out. It's just a little tip for keeping your pattern and your project lined up as you're moving things around. What you're always going to find inside the applique pack, you'll see on the front cover, whatever you see inside the design box will be included in that package. All of the pieces of fabric are already pre-fused with Steam-A-Seam 2. They just have a paper backing on it that you have to peel off. They also have the fabric is laser cut, so you get a really crisp edge, and once it's fused in place, it's permanent. Does not require any top stitching on the edge of the fabric. That comes all inside each of the packages. You also get an instruction pamphlet telling you exactly how the process of putting it together is, and you get the pattern for that unit. Some people have also used their pattern to reproduce the piece later, using their own fabric and the traditional method of needle turn, or if they're just using raw edge applique. But there is a full-size placement diagram in each pattern to help you locate where the pieces go. As you can see, we have all of our pieces laid out. I grouped everything in like pieces, so we have all of our leaves up in the upper right hand corner there. Also in the right side we have the components of the bicycle. I laid out all of the lettering just above the letters, and that may be where I'm going to start today. because that way I can move the pattern down. And on the left hand side we have the large wheels and the sprockets, and we have all of the flower components that you can see, and I laid them all out in like pieces. You just want to be careful because some of the smaller circles that you see there are 3 different sizes of the green circle, and there's 2 different sizes of the purple centers. So just make sure you're paying attention when you're putting these together. But that's one of the only things you really have to do with this, because it goes together so easily. Each piece of the design is laser cut out, and it's also pre-fused with Steam-A-Seam 2. It has a paper backing on there that allows us to package these with them all getting stuck together. All you have to do is peel this paper off. I don't usually have any problem, they usually peel right away. But as a trick, there's 2 other things you could do if you have a stubborn piece. You could score the back of the paper with a needle. You could also score it with the point of a seam ripper. The point of it is not to go all the way through the fabric, of course, it's just to perforate the paper and allow you to get a hold of an edge. But I find that the paper always peels off really nice, and you can see on here that shiny, sticky substance is the Steam-A-Seam 2, and you can see that it's tacky to the touch, which allows us to position it, but also it's not permanent until it's ironed. So if you need to, you could reposition this just by peeling it up and replacing it. And I've already, just to save a little time, have peeled off the paper on the rest of this lettering, and we'll just knock that out of the way. You can just put your hand on there also. The heat of your hand would be enough to also ensure that the pieces stick where they are until you get to the ironing board. Because I'm going to have to move this at some point to get my light table out. I believe the top of my light table is acrylic, and it wouldn't really enjoy the iron very much. And some of you with really good eyes might see that when I was ironing my fabric, I got a spot on my white background. So I repositioned the paper just enough to allow that little spot to get covered with the lettering. So there went away my little stain. Sometimes with the little flowers and leaves, you can reposition them to cover over a problem or a mistake that you might have had if you were doing a pieced block and doing this applique on top of it. I personally have been doing applique just about since I started quilting, which is around 1991. Applique has always been one of my favorite styles of quilting. I just love the way it looks. And generally I do a lot of hand applique, needle turn. But I can't finish everything that I want to get done because hand applique takes so long. And this is why I love the ease and simplicity of this laser cut pre-fused applique. Just this section here, the Merry Christmas, if I were hand appliquing that could take a week, maybe even more, and I just did it in probably 4 or 5 minutes. So now those are stuck on there good enough that I can reposition the whole piece on the light box and start moving into the next components of this, which are going to be the bicycle. The bicycle is in the background and then the flowers are on top. So I'll go ahead and do the bicycle first, and what I'll be doing is on some of these compound pieces, like this is the wheel and the sprockets and the spoke. What I would do is put these on first so I can get them centered, and then put this one on here so that I can find the location of it without having to try and see through 3 or 4 layers. So I'm going to go ahead and get the wheels and the bicycle started, and we'll see how far we get with that. I have the next segment laid out, so I'm going to go ahead. I've already fused the center to the middle section of the circle so I can keep my placement guide. And then I'll go ahead and lay that in place. I already have this wheel, the front wheel, placed on. And I'm just going to peel the paper off and get that positioned. I don't know if you're able to see it, but I can see through that dark fabric just enough to get that location of the circle wedge. And then we're just going to go ahead and peel the rest of these paper. This piece has done something that it's important to see. The fabric is not completely connected to the adhesive. The fabric's peeling away and leaving the Steam and Seam 2 on the paper. And this does happen occasionally. Actually, it's the first time since I've been recording that it's happened, I believe. So what I will do is put the on the ironing board and just give this a quick iron and refuse that and let it cool for a few minutes, and then that will peel off. I'm going to have to wait for my iron to heat back up. But I'm going to move on to the rest of the pieces. I like to keep looking back at the diagram because some of these pieces are, you know, they're all different colors, but there's a value component to these that makes the whole design pop. That's all factored in. And so you want to put, in this case, the darker of the two handlebars in the background and the lighter one in the front, and that helps make that whole design look more realistic. We're going to put on our seat so that when we're doing our pedal power, we actually have someplace to sit down while we're riding around town. Yep, that's hot. That's just all it took. Now I'm going to go ahead and let that cool down because I just burnt my fingers on the iron. So we'll limit how many times today I'll burn myself. But that is occupational hazard for working with a hot iron. You can see if you were trying to do this by hand applique that it would take you a lot longer than what this is taking. We would never get it finished for this Christmas. And I want this one hanging before the holidays get here. As I said earlier, Petal Power comes in 4 different seasons. There's winter, spring, summer, and fall. And this is the larger of the two ways that it comes. It comes in this size, but it also comes in a smaller size that would be used as, you know, like for the back of a shirt or jacket, or you could put it on an average size tote bag. It would be the perfect size for that. I'm going to go ahead and finish the rest of the chain cover and the petal, and then we'll move on to some flowers. I've spent a lot of time trying to get these leaves put in the right places. I've really been looking at the placement on the cover photo so that I get the shape and the color right. And I can see here where this is not really reading properly, and so I know I have it in the wrong place because the designer would not have done that. So I'm going to go ahead and reposition that, and that is one of the great things about this Steam product, is that it's tacky to the touch and I can place it and it will stay there while I'm working. But I can also reposition these, and there the value on that stands out better on the wheel, and so I know I've done a better job. The last thing I want to do during a pandemic is have the designer have to come to my home to beat me for misplacing one of these leaves. So I have all of the leaves placed, and now I'm going to move on to the flowers. I wanted the leaves to be on first because they kind of read as the background, but really none of the flowers are overlapping those. So I'm going to go ahead and start moving on to some of these flowers and get those going. Again, with these circles, what I will do is put the center dot on the circle before I move to put the flower in the background, just so I can get these little dots located properly. So we'll get some of those on and we'll see how this finishes. I've gone ahead and put together my little flower components. One of the things I wanted to mention, you can see on a lot of the pieces there's some dotted lines. The dotted lines on a pattern piece indicate where something goes behind something else. So we know that this particular flower has dotted lines on it, and so that one is going to go down first before the one that's also pictured in the same area. So that's just one way of letting you know which piece to put down first. I've gone ahead and peeled the paper off of these also, so that makes it a little bit easier to see which way we're going. That doesn't seem to fit there. This one I did not peel the paper. Maybe if I study the pattern again, I can figure it out. This one looks like it goes down front. Okay, I have that one done. Now this dot one goes up here. Well, it's going to take me a second till I figure out where I'm putting these last couple ones in, because it doesn't. We'll see if I figure it out. I've got these three flowers in the wrong place, so I'm just going to, and this is the great thing again about these being repositionable, because I've placed them and now I can just peel them up and figure out where they go. I'm going to go ahead and get those put into the right place, but I'm going to have to put on my thinking cap, obviously, and then we'll get on to these last three flowers, which are little compound flowers. Those will go on easy enough, but we're almost finished. Well, I've sorted myself out. I got my flowers in place, and I went ahead and did the first two of the three compound flower units. These, again, you can see there's a really important value component That centerpiece is the darker unit. It goes in the back. The darker colors always are in the back, and they move forward to create a level of dimension to the project. So we'll go ahead and put the next 2 wedges in. These are slightly lighter, and then these last 2 petals in. These are the lightest color of the 3 reds. And then, ta-da, we're getting to the very last peeling of paper to place on our flower. Now I'm just going to go ahead and put my hand on these pieces just to warm them up just enough so I can move the light box out. One of the things people think I'm crazy probably, but I have a box of these little shapes that come off of the back, the little paper. I think one day I would like to play with some sun dye and lay these shapes on top of some fabric after I put the sun dye on it, and see if these shapes emerge in the sun-dyed fabric. I think that might be fun. So we're going to move the light box out of the way, and then we'll go ahead and iron this in place, and we'll show you our finished petal power. As you can see, we have all of our pieces in place. None of this has been ironed yet. Some of it is still, you can see little edges flipping up. But you can see that the tackiness of the Steam-A-Seam 2 has all of the pieces positioned good enough that I can move this project around without the pieces falling off. This is one of the things that we love about the Steam-A-Seam 2, and it's why we use it in our product. If you want to, well, first, the Steam-A-Seam 2 does require moisture to activate. That's why steam is in the name of the product, Steam-A-Seam 2. So I'm going to go ahead and just spritz a little bit of water on top of the components like a crazy person. And then I'm going to go ahead and cover this with a Teflon pressing sheet. I'm just taking this step because my iron spurted earlier and made a spot on the background, and I don't want a repeat of that. So the moisture in the spritz bottle will activate the steam. It's trapped in there. And I'll just hold this in place on any of the sections while the components fuse. I've said this many times, but one of the most common problems with Steam-A-Seam 2 is that people don't fuse it long enough. They don't use steam, and they're worried that they're going to over fuse the Steam-A-Seam 2, which just isn't possible. You would burn your fabric long before you would ever damage the Steam-A-Seam adhesive. If you're getting gumming on your needle when you're stitching over a project that has Steam-A-Seam 2, it's an indication that the fusing process was too short. So I'm just going to go ahead and finish ironing this. This is about as exciting as watching paint dry, but as soon as I get it finished, I'll go ahead and show you the finished project. One of the things I always do after I finish ironing the front of the project is to always flip it over and iron the project from the back as well. Especially when you have an applique pattern that has several compound pieces where one section is layered over top of another and another. We want to make sure that the heat of the iron gets all the way to the back of those. So the best way to achieve that is just by flipping the project over when you're finished and re-ironing it all from the back. But you can see now that we have our petal power completely finished. This is the Christmas edition, and I hope soon to be able to have time to get this quilted, and maybe it'll be hanging behind me in one of our future videos. But this was my favorite of the 4 seasons. I'm really partial to Christmas. And we want to thank you for stopping in and joining us today, and we hope to see you next time.